and welcome to World Today. The focus of the global community has moved to the race for finding a vaccine. Researchers and scientists across the globe are trying to come up with a vaccine, so much so that preclinical and clinical trials have moved ahead simultaneously. We'll also focus on the world's most sought-after drug, hydroxychloroquine, and the reasons behind the growing demand. But before we dive in, let's take a look at the headlines. In an exclusive conversation with World Today, leading scientist Professor Vasan says lockdown was essential to flatten the curve on the spread of the coronavirus through social distancing. According to his research, ferrets are susceptible to SARS-CoV-2 and they have since developed this animal model to perform efficacy testing of vaccine candidates. Hydroxychloroquine is the new magical drug. While world leaders have started a new COVID war over the drug, India comes to their rescue. This is a World Today exclusive. Joining me on Spotlight this week is India-born Professor Vasan, who is running the world's first multi-vaccine animal efficacy studies funded by CEPI, which is the Global Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations and supported by Government of India. He leads the dangerous pathogens team at Australia's Science Agency. Many thanks for joining us, Professor Vasan.
It's a pleasure, Geeta ji.
Let me begin by asking you to explain as to how exactly the preclinical trials that you're conducting are really taking place. We know you've had a lot of breakthroughs, but what is the preclinical research that you and your team is involved in?
So the Doherty Institute in Melbourne were able to isolate this virus from an imported case and passed it on to us. So we were the first lab outside of China to grow sufficient stocks of this virus to initiate preclinical research. This involves physical and molecular characterization of this virus. How does it replicate? How is the host response? And things like that. But we also were the first in the world to show that ferrets are susceptible to SARS-CoV-2. And we have since developed this animal model to perform efficacy testing of vaccine candidates. And this work is being funded by the Global Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, also called CEPI. And we are at the moment running the world's first multi-vaccine efficacy studies in ferrets.
Professor Vasan, are there different strains of the coronavirus that are being used in vaccine evaluation?
Yeah, so we've just published a paper in Transboundary and Emerging Diseases Journal where we've looked at the first 181 published genome sequences of this virus to understand how it's evolving into distinct clusters, which you would expect for an RNA virus. I do not believe that the strains we are using are having any particular problems in terms of the animal model validation for these vaccines. But of course, we will keep a close eye on the situation. And as you can see, there are over 4,000 sequences now available. So we are continuing to monitor the situation closely.
Why ferrets? I ask you this because the first cross-species transmission has been reported from the Bronx Zoo in New York, where a tiger has been found positive for coronavirus for COVID-19.
So there is a protein in the news called ACE2, which is important because it serves as the entry point into cells for many of the coronaviruses, such as this one. So if you look at the 5 residues on this protein, which are important for receptor binding, and you see that ferrets and actually tigers, as it turns out, have many of the appropriate amino acids in the right locations. So what you say is not surprising. However, you would agree with me, it's easier to work with ferrets than with tigers. But there's a more important reason why we have used ferrets, because the lung physiology of ferrets closely mimics the human situation. So it's a widely used model for respiratory infections such as influenza.
I believe, Professor Vasan, you're about to start clinical trials, but then that always brings to fore the question of should scientists infect healthy people with the coronavirus to test vaccines?
So the CSIRO does not conduct any human clinical trials. Those are conducted by the developers of the various vaccines. There are known to be over 115 vaccine candidates under development, of which 8 are funded by CEPI, which I mentioned earlier. And of those 8, 3 of them have entered phase 1 clinical trials in humans. And the first one is Moderna, and the next is Inovio, and the third is Oxford. And we are evaluating in animal models the Inovio and the Oxford candidate. And if you look at it, you're not actually infecting healthy people with coronavirus in order to test the vaccine. At this stage, the phase 1 clinical trials are essentially looking at safety. So ideally, you would complete the preclinical research before you initiate phase 1. But in a current pandemic situation, it's deemed acceptable by the regulators to start healthy volunteer studies. However, for these vaccine candidates to proceed to the next phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials, which is where you will be testing for efficacy in humans, you will require the animal efficacy data in conjunction with the phase 1 data, which is why the trials which we are conducting here, and indeed there will be other laboratories which will be looking at other animal models, will be absolutely critical for the data package that will go into seeking the phase 2 approvals.
What are some of the key research questions you're trying to answer with your multi-vaccine studies, Professor Vasan? Are you in touch with scientists in other parts of the world working on similar projects of developing a vaccine?
So vaccine development efforts in the modern world are not any one person's endeavor. It's by definition collaborative. Having said that, we are functioning as an independent evaluator for CEPI in animal efficacy studies. So we are, distant to the individual developers and what they are doing to optimize their vaccine candidates. Having said that, we are supporting the University of Queensland's vaccine in scale-up through the CSIRO manufacturing. With the candidates I'm evaluating, one of them is Oxford's candidate, currently envisaged by the university as a intramuscular injection. But I'm also evaluating whether giving the vaccine through the nose intranasally will result in additional protection through mucosal immunity, and therefore potentially will one dose be sufficient. And with both the vaccines I'm evaluating, the Inovio and the Oxford vaccine, I'm looking at whether a single dose would be sufficient or whether you would also require a booster dose. Of course, these are being evaluated in animals and will have to be repeated in humans based on the findings we come up with.
Now, there are reports that those who receive vaccines or for TB are less susceptible to getting infected with the coronavirus. Is there any specific truth to these reports, Professor Vasan?
So these heterologous effects of the BCG vaccine could be due to non-specific boosting of the immune response. And indeed, this vaccine is known to offer protection against other mycobacteria such as leprosy and also some entirely unrelated respiratory illnesses. So it's not surprising that this is being looked at from a repurposing point of view, and my colleagues at the Murdoch's Children's Research Institute in Australia are looking into this, and I would be keen to understand what comes out of this study.
The one drug that these days has really become the most sought after, Professor Vasan, is hydroxychloroquine. Is there any medical corroboration to the fact that this drug cures patients with COVID-19?
So when I was with Public Health England, we found that chloroquine inhibits the replication of the Ebola virus in vitro, but failed to protect in vivo in guinea pigs. So that didn't go further. This sort of thing is not novel. The idea of repurposing chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine in order to solve a major pandemic or a public health emergency is the right thing for scientists to do. But what we need to make sure is that we carefully balance that need against the safety and efficacy studies, which need to happen both in animals as well as in carefully calibrated human trials. And this is essentially a regulatory question. So it's up to the regulators of the individual countries to determine what is right for the population. So as far as we are concerned, in India, in Australia, US, etc., the regulatory system is quite mature and can handle this question. There is plenty of peer-reviewed literature available and more emerging during this COVID crisis, and we need to wait and see what the answer comes out instead of speculating in media.
As a professional from the medical and science field, was the Indian government's decision to lock down to contain spread of the virus the right approach?
Absolutely. Flattening the curve through social distancing and lockdown is essentially the strategy that Australia, India, and indeed many other countries are following. And the Indian government has been widely praised by the international community and the WHO for showing a decisive leadership in terms of trying to manage this crisis, especially because India, with its very large population, can't afford to have a very large number of deaths over a short period of time. And it's the responsibility of every citizen to make sure that we do our part in handling this crisis.
Finally, Professor Vasan, you are Dangerous Pathogens Team Leader at CSIRO. That sounds ominous. What kind of pathogens does your team work with, and how do you protect yourselves?
Yes, so the facility I work for, the CSIRO Australian Centre for Disease Preparedness, which was previously called the Australian Animal Health Laboratory, it's the world's largest operational PC3, PC4 complex where we can conduct studies with small and large animals on a range of zoonotic pathogens under near GLP conditions. Now, what we mean by PC3, PC4 is the physical containment 3 and 4, which map to the biosafety level 3 and 4 containment. So these are the highest containment you can imagine. So we work with a range of pathogens, Ebola, Nipah, Hendra, and so we have been involved in the forefront of development and evaluation of countermeasures. And this is something which we do for our job, and we take obviously adequate precautions, and it's one of the safest places to work and make a difference.
Many thanks for joining us on World Today, Professor Vasan. It was indeed a pleasure. Wishing you success from here in India in coming up with a solution to contain this global pandemic.
Thank you.
An important takeaway from the interview is that lockdown was essential to flatten the curve. It is the TINA factor that applies here. There is no alternative but social distancing. With that, we slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll speak about the COVID war over dominance and survival. Welcome back. US has taken the lead in the search for demand of hydroxychloroquine, with many countries following Trump's lead. India, which is a leading manufacturer of the drug, has had a flurry of requests from no less than 30 countries wanting to acquire HCQ or HCQS should things reach community transmission stage. But is hydroxychloroquine the new magic drug? Let's find out.
This is the new era. The new war for dominance and for survival has begun. While the world is looking for a cure for Covid-19, the race to procure the miracle drug has put all on tenterhooks. Yes, it is the new age war, where only science can help you survive.
Maybe and maybe not. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We have to see. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy.
President Donald Trump has gone to lengths to procure hydroxychloroquine. The drug he thinks could be the solution to his biggest problem. While he insists that HCQ is the answer, his aide, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the country's top infectious disease doctor, said that there is no conclusive evidence to support that theory.
As with malaria, it might be used as a prophylaxis against COVID-19.
No, the answer is no. The information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it.
Amid raging debate in US on whether HCQ is effective or not, the Trump administration is determined to acquire as much as it can, whatever be the means and method. But there are conflicting reports. There are reports of people having consumed some form of the drug and died. There are also reports of people getting better. In this tug of war between hegemony and survival, it seems like Trump lost focus. America was among many countries looking to India for hydroxychloroquine. Over 30 nations and counting. US resorted to strong-arm tactics.
I don't like that decision. I didn't hear that was his decision. I know that he stopped it for other countries. I spoke to him yesterday. We had a very good talk, and we'll see whether or not that's his. I would be surprised if he would, because India does very well with the United States. For many years, they've been taking advantage of the United States on trade. So I would be surprised if that were his decision. He'd have to tell me that. I spoke to him Sunday morning, called him, and I said, we'd appreciate your allowing our supply to come out. If he doesn't allow it to come out, that would be okay. But, of course, there may be retaliation. Why wouldn't there be? I'll get to that toward the middle.
Followed by praises for Modi.
Our national stockpile is now equipped with nearly 30 million hydroxychloroquine pills. So we've got a lot. I want to thank Prime Minister Modi of India for allowing us to have what we requested from before the problem arose. And he was terrific. We'll remember it.
India is not going to be beaten down by any threats. A policy decision to release paid-for consignments was taken long before Trump's remarks. Brazil will also be getting its consignment of orders placed before hydroxychloroquine was put under the prohibited list, banning its exports.
Nossos parabéns ao Dr. Kalil. Temos mais boas notícias.
In outcome of my direct conversation with PM Modi, we will receive by Saturday raw materials to continue our production of hydroxychloroquine. We can now treat the patients of COVID-19.
Tratar pacientes da Covid-19.
Amid a global debate on whether the anti-malarial drug will prove effective in treating COVID-19, the Indian Council of Medical Research has recommended the use of anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine under exceptional circumstances as a line of treatment against high-risk coronavirus patients. According to the advisory, it should be given to high-risk population. Asymptomatic healthcare workers involved in the care of suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 and asymptomatic household contacts of lab-confirmed cases. This all started in early March when a French study launched an experiment to see whether hydroxychloroquine, a well-known old malaria drug, could be a cure. And before we knew, it was termed a game changer by President Trump.
Very little evidence that hydroxychloroquine either prevents or treats COVID-19 because most of the evidence comes from experiments in cells and labs. So basically these cells have been infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus and then it was found that hydroxychloroquine was inhibiting the growth of the virus. But what happens really often is that when people try to do these studies in human beings, the entire organism, in randomized controlled trials, they often find that they cannot replicate the findings in cells.
While the jury is still out on hydroxychloroquine, US has waged war against the WHO, announcing withdrawal of funds.
The World Health Organization receives vast amounts of money from the United States, and we pay for a majority, a biggest portion of their money. And they were wrong. They've been wrong about a lot of things. And they had a lot of information early, and they didn't want to. They seem to be very China-centric, and we're going to put a hold on money spent to the WHO. We're going to put a very powerful hold on it, and we're going to see. It's a great thing if it works, but when they call every shot wrong, that's no good.
Washington is not alone in this. Many have questioned WHO's response to the pandemic. But Dr. Tedros defended himself by urging US and China to unite in this fight and quarantine COVID politics.
The United States and China should come together and fight this dangerous enemy. They should come together to fight it. And the rest of G20 should come together to fight it.
It is a fact that in 2019, while US contributed over $440 million to WHO, in contrast, China only gave $44 million. And yet China heads 4 of the UN's 15 specialized agencies. The coronavirus pandemic has caused a global scramble for essential medical supplies like masks, gloves, gowns, and ventilators. In the panic, governments everywhere have imposed or considered new barriers to trade, trying to protect their own access to scarce supplies. And even as that reality sinks in, let's not forget that Trump continues to indulge in his own bullying tactics, from not allowing exports of items abroad to, according to reports, redirecting important medical equipments that were to go to Germany from the US. While US tries to get a grip on the situation, the fact that a Russian military plane landed on American soil to provide coronavirus aid and equipment is a sign of changing times and global rebalance.
Well, the race for vaccine is the biggest race right now. Let's take a look at where all research is taking place, which are the countries that have taken a lead, and is there a solution in sight in the near future? Only 2 vaccine candidates have reached the human trial phase across the globe. The first one belongs to a joint venture between Chinese firm CanSino Biological Inc. and Beijing Institute of Biotechnology, while the second, codenamed mRNA 1273, is being developed in the US. According to the proposal filed by Chinese scientists, their evaluation includes 36 healthy adults who will be followed up for the next 6 months following the first dose. Whereas the American trial comprises 45 healthy adults who will be followed up for 394 days after the second dose. Israel has begun testing a COVID-19 vaccine prototype on rodents at its biochemical defense laboratory. Once the vaccine is developed, it will take at least 90 days to complete the regulatory process and potentially more to enter the marketplace. Talking to the Jerusalem Post, a team of Israeli researchers said that they are days away from completing the production of the active component of a coronavirus vaccine that could be tested on humans as early as 1st of June. While researchers in Oxford University desperately try to develop a vaccine for COVID-19, French scientists at Pasteur Institute are modifying the measles vaccine to work against the coronavirus, but do not expect it to be ready for about 20 months. European Commission had earlier provided a grant of 80 million euros to a German biotech company, CureVac, to scale up development and production of vaccine. A few weeks ago, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen had said that the European research companies might develop a vaccine by autumn. Researchers in Europe have begun clinical trials on a vaccine for the virus involving more than 3,200 individuals. A week ago, Australian government scientists also began the first stages of testing for a potential vaccine against the COVID-19 outbreak. Australia's National Science Agency aims to test 2 vaccine candidates over the next 3 months. One of the 2 vaccines to be tested is a vector vaccine developed by University of Oxford, and the other is from an American biotechnology company, Inovio Pharmaceuticals. The candidates were identified by CEPI in consultation with the World Health Organization. India's Zydus Cadila, Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech are among the global firms working on COVID-19 vaccine. ICMR has made it clear that no vaccine in India has reached the stage of human trials yet. The National Institute of Virology, Pune, and Department of Biotechnology are spearheading 18 other research institutes in India in developing a vaccine. Reports suggest that the government has also received at least 7,000 proposals from private companies in India to fight the virus. Two French doctors sparked controversy after they suggested that the vaccine for coronavirus could be tested in Africa. Dr. Jean-Paul Mira and Dr. Camille Locke made these remarks during a TV debate that later sparked outrage, and they were accused of treating Africans like human guinea pigs. The head of WHO condemned the proposal and called it a hangover from colonial mentality. The African CDC also condemned the suggestion and called for global solidarity in this time of crisis. That's all from me on World Today. We'll bring you a lot more exclusives next week, but our coverage on coronavirus continues. Stay tuned to India Today.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.